All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Law Review Symposium, Prisoners' Rights, Protecting Civil Liberties. I'm Olivia Johnson, and I'm honored to be this year's editor-in-chief of the Law Review. The Law Review is Roger Williams School of Law's legal journal, and we publish 3 editions each year, one of which is deemed our Justice for All edition, and focuses on a different topic relating to legal justice. In honor of the Justice for All edition, we host symposia like the one today to promote equity and justice throughout the legal sector. Law Review has also created 2 executive board positions, the Justice for All editor and Justice for All development editor, held this year by Anna McGilvray and Allison Brochu, with whom I've absolutely enjoyed working and are dedicated to furthering the mission of this edition. On behalf of the Law Review, I want to thank you all for joining us, our panelists, faculty, students, practitioners, and community members for what promises to be an important and timely conversation. The title of this symposium captures a fundamental challenge in our legal system, ensuring that constitutional rights and access to resources don't end at the prison gate. Incarcerated individuals are among our society's most vulnerable populations, often facing systemic inequities long before entering the justice system and enduring profound barriers once inside it. Protecting their rights is not only a constitutional imperative, but also a measure of our collective commitment to human dignity and fairness. Today's discussions will explore how the law protects, and too often fails to protect, the rights of those who are incarcerated, and how those protections shape broader understandings of justice, accountability, and equality. We're honored to host speakers whose work spans advocacy, scholarship, and direct service, each offering critical perspectives on issues ranging from the conditions of confinement and access to counsel, re-entry, rehabilitation, and reform. This symposium also comes on the heels of the creation of the Prisoners' Rights Clinic, run by Professor Jared Goldstein at Roger Williams Law. The clinic, which allows students to engage in civil litigation on behalf of currently and formerly incarcerated individuals, shows the law school's dedication to this important issue. The Law Review is proud to be publishing scholarship written by Professors Shannon Heary and Bernard Freeman, an essay written by Allison Brochu and myself, as well as student comments written by our second-year Law Review members as part of this edition. Thank you to our moderators, who will help our panelists get at the heart of their advocacy and the need to protect prisoners' rights. I'd also like to thank Law Review advisors, Professor and Assistant Dean for Curricular Innovation, Nicole Dyshlewski, Professor Ellen Farwell, and Dr. Justin Gishwa, who couldn't be here today, for help planning this symposium. Their guidance in planning today was essential. Thank you. Chelsea Horn, Director of Programs and Initiatives, also dedicated an immense amount of time to our organization in the planning of this event, for which we are so grateful. I'd also like to thank Emerson Prison Initiative and Troutman Pepper Locke for sponsoring today's event. And I think most importantly, I'd like to thank Anna McGilvray and Allison Brochu for their time and dedication today. We've been so excited to see our ideas come to life throughout the planning process, and this symposium would not be happening without them. Throughout the planning process, the 2 of them received a lot of anxious texts from me, all of which were answered with humor and understanding, something I deeply appreciated. Thank you again for being here and for engaging in this dialogue about what it means to safeguard civil liberties behind bars and beyond. Now I'd like to hand the floor to Dean Gregory Bowman to give the school's land acknowledgement and some opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. This is a great turnout. I think this is the best turnout for a Law Review Symposium we've had since the pandemic. So to all of you, thank you. So this is a great topic. It is one that aligns directly with our law school's mission. Before I give the land and labor acknowledgement, I want to talk a little bit about what law reviews mean. So one of the true blessings of being a legal educator is we get to train our future colleagues, who are the lawyers and the leaders and the change makers of the next generation. There are many of us in this room who have ties to Roger Williams because some were students or currently students. Others are members of the community that support and help advance our mission with us collectively. And Law Review is a place where we can do multiple things at once. You emerge as leaders. future colleagues. Interesting and relevant topics that advance scholarship and knowledge and also engage with the outside community, and that blending of the academic and the immediately relevant and public interest and public service is really the place where law reviews can make magic happen. And I think that this year's topic is fantastic. It aligns with what we believe in. And again, for everyone who's here with busy schedules, thank you for your time. So I will start us with our land and labor acknowledgement, which also is a reflection of the values that we hold dear at this institution. So as we begin, let's take a moment to reflect on the lands on which we reside. Roger Williams University School of Law's Bristol campus is located on the ancestral and traditional lands of Indigenous people. Together, we honor and acknowledge the Narragansett Okanoket Nations as the original stewards of this land who lived on it, governed on it, and cared for it long before the arrival of European settlers. We also recognize that the foundations of this country were built through the forced labor of enslaved African people. The town of Bristol, including the land upon which our campus stands, was significantly shaped and enriched by the transatlantic slave trade. We acknowledge this painful history and its enduring legacy, and we honor the resilience, knowledge, cultural contributions of the African diaspora whose labor was exploited through systems of violence and white supremacy. Thank you again for being here. It's my pleasure to turn the podium over to two of my faculty colleagues and advisors to the Law Review, Professors Ellen Farwell and Nicole Jaslewski.
We have the most fun job of today. Over the last 6 months, we have had the honor of watching Olivia and Allison and Anna work really, really hard and be creative, be problem solvers, be diplomatic, be persistent. And it is so exciting to be here with them today and to be with you today. But before we jump into all of the great conversation that's going to happen today, we want to thank them for their diligence and their hard work and their dedication to making today happen for all of us. So come on up here. And they told us they're going to need a nap at 3 o'clock. Don't look for them after the symposium.
You know, it's really rude to make a girl tear up before she has to speak again. Okay. For the attendees today, Wi-Fi is available. There's your passcode. And there are also signs posted inside and outside of this room if you need it. If anybody also needs to attend a confidential meeting at any point throughout the day, please visit the law library downstairs. Private rooms are available for use, but you will need a photo ID in order to get those. Please be aware of the 2 exits at the front of the room. This is my only time to be like an air traffic controller, who are not working today, unfortunately. Bathrooms are outside this door to the left. There's also a water fountain by the bathrooms and a cafe downstairs for anybody that needs anything. After each panel, we'll have a 15-minute break with a half-hour lunch break at 1 o'clock. We also have several organizations involved in today's event that have provided informational materials at a table outside. So please take a moment to look at their materials during the breaks. And if you're in need of CLE certification, please don't forget to pick up your certificate at the end of the day. Oh, look at that, right on time. Okay. All right, now I'd like to briefly introduce our first panel on access to resources. While incarcerated, prisoners often lose access to a variety of resources, including the ability to communicate with their loved ones, access to gender affirming care and protections against sexual violence, and a free flow of education and reading materials. The panel will be moderated by Professor Nicole Dyshlewski and Roger Williams Law 3L Jackaleski, and the panel includes speakers Michael Mushlin, professor at Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law at Pace University, Dr. Therese Sink of Providence Books Through Bars, and Nick Horton, co-executive director of Open Doors. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Is my mic on? Yes. All right, perfect. Thanks.
All right, let's do this.
So,
Yeah, that's right. We'll wait for him now. Hi. Nice to meet you. Hi. Okay.
Thank you all for joining us today to talk about access to resources for incarcerated people. Before we get started, can each of you introduce yourselves, maybe with your name, from, and what brings you to this conversation?
Sure. So my name is Horton. I'm the co-executive director of Open Doors. You can read more about us in my bio, but we were founded in 2003, so I'd say we're the sort of first agency in the state dedicated to helping people with criminal records. So I've been doing this work there since 2004, and have worked on a wide number of campaigns related to legislative advocacy efforts around reducing barriers to people with records, and also expanding services for them.
I'm Therese Sink. I'm a volunteer with Providence Book Through Bars. I've got a little bit more information on the tables out there if you want to know. So this is a more than 20-year-old organization based in Providence that receives letters from prisoners and fills that with donated books. We send about 2,000 packages a year. So the organization became a 501c3 in 2011. It was founded by a group of feminist artists at Dirt Palace and has been in a variety of different settings. Right now it's in the basement of a Episcopal church in Warwick, which is where I am from. And my own story, I've been working with the organization for about 6 years. I'm a semi-retired family physician who was an English major way back when, so I love to read. And my job is to open the mail. We get about 4,000 letters a year. So that's about 300 to 400 a month, and respond to about 200 of those. And as I talk, I'll tell you what happens to the rest of them. So I was invited, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. My name is Michael Mushlin, and I'm delighted to be here in this beautiful campus and this incredible state. I've always admired Rhode Island. I've never had the chance really to visit until now. I am a professor of law emeritus at Pace University in White Plains, New York, and I think my credential is I'm the oldest person in the I have this month, this November, is my 52nd year doing prison reform work. It's nothing that's just a testament to survival, really. So let me briefly mention, I started out as a civil rights lawyer with the Prison Rights Project of the Legal Aid Society, which did 1983 litigation in federal court in the Southern District, Eastern District, Northern District of New York, dealing with conditions of confinement in New York City jails and New York State prisons. I then worked at the American Civil Liberties Union, and when I got into academia, I've continued to be involved in prison reform in several ways. I have a treatise, which I hope you have in your library, called The Rights of Prisoners, which is a 4-volume treatise published by Thomson Reuters, and it's in its 5th edition. I have written on the topic of prisoners' rights, and I have served as the chair of the board of directors of the Correctional Association of New York, which is a 180-year-old organization that has legislative authority to visit prisons, and I served on the Corrections Committee of the New York City Bar Association, the ABA Task Force on Prisoners' Rights. And what I really want to talk to you about is, for some reason, I got appointed to the New York State Advisory Committee on Criminal Law, which is a part of the New York State Judiciary, and I chaired a subcommittee on judicial visits to prisons, which I really want to talk to you about because I want to talk to you about it, and I've got handouts about it too. We're in now a period of public comment on this, and if this, well, I'll talk about it later. But I really would love to talk to you about that, and I'm going to advocate. I really want your help.
Thanks. So some behind the scenes gossip about our panel today is that yesterday morning, two of our panelists dropped out. One, because they were sick, and Nick Horton stepped in yesterday to replace the speaker. So thank you, Nick. And the other, because their parole officer would not permit them to leave Massachusetts to come here today to be a part of our panel. And so I think it's sort of helpful to understand how we got to where we are today, and who is missing from the conversation, and why that happened. I'm going to set the stage with two complimentary questions to everyone on the panel who can answer in whatever order they see fit. What does it mean to you for an incarcerated person to have access to resources? And how do current policies and practices affect incarcerated individuals' access to essential resources like education, healthcare, and legal materials?
So I'll start. So reading, we believe at Providence Books Through Bars, is a basic human right. And so that was part of what gave birth to this organization. Kind of the grandmother of Books Through Bars is in Quincy, Massachusetts. Big organization, sends about 10,000 packages a year. And they also have some paid staff, not a lot, but they also put out a lot of resources, which the organizations that do what we do around the country, there's probably a book through bar in almost all the states, and resources. So they print out a resource list that I can download the PDF and copy and mail to prisoners. They have a pen pal list. They have a list for LGBTQ. So a variety of different resources. And so we take a lot of our guidance from them. And one of the child librarians who volunteers with us lives in Bedford, Massachusetts, drives to Warwick to work with us. That's about an hour. We're a smaller operation than Quincy, and in our spot, you open the letter, you read the letter, you fill the prisoner's requests. That can be a variety of different things, which we can talk more about. And then you write them a personal note. And I think the personal note is a really important part of that. And I brought some show and tell. One of the fun things is that if we sign our name or whatever our pseudonym is, we sometimes get a thank you from the prisoners. So it's that human to human connection. And that child librarian says, it's kind of like the reason we do book events in the library during the summer is we don't want the kids to lose their reading skills. And many jails do not have libraries. Many prisons do, but just because there is a library doesn't mean that it's open, that it has a variety of books to read, or that the prisoner has access. So I guess I'll stop there. It was a two-part question, so I'll stop there and can say more later.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So I want to start by following up on what Nicole said about who's not here. So our Deputy Director, Dina Bruce, was slated to be on the panel today and was sick. But she's part of our leadership team. And I think what's essential, or what's really important about Open Doors' work is that it is led by people who themselves have overcome the obstacles that we're trying to help our clients overcome. And so a large number of our staff, but the majority of our leadership team are people who have basically shown what is possible when you invest in people, not prisons. I know that the organizers tried hard to make sure that there was a voice here on the panel and on all the panels of someone who's gone through that. So I apologize that you're hearing from me instead of one of the other members of our staff. I tried to get a bunch of different people to show up today, and they were all either sick or busy. So to answer your question, I would say basically, I think what it means to have access is it means to be able to succeed and take advantage of those opportunities, like the people on our staff have, like all of us have. So I think someone coming out of prison should be able to have the opportunity to be healthy and happy and well, just like we all do. Now, that's obviously an ideal. I would sort of answer the question by talking about a program that we founded in 2013 called 9 Yards. The phrase was going the whole 9 yards to end the cycle of crime and incarceration. It was a very ambitious pilot program to see if we provide a lot of resources to someone coming out of prison, can we actually give them the opportunity to turn their life around? Because we've been doing this work at that point for about a decade, and what we saw over and over again, we were doing the discharge planning services for people coming out of prison, is that you help people a little bit, but there's this hill, and you can help them climb up part of the way, and then they slide back down. So can we get people all the way over the hill? It was a very, I guess, intense and ambitious project because we actually really tried to hold ourselves to that standard. And so we started by providing lots of services in prison, college classes, vocational classes. We opened up a welding program, we ran a computer repair class. I was in there teaching most days during the week. Then we purchased a house so that when people came out, they could live in that house. I was very naive and ambitious, so I lived in the house with them for about a year, which was also extremely intense and challenging. And we connected people to all the resources that we could, right? And it was also a randomized controlled trial, so we could try to see what happened. And there's a lot of long stories that came out of that experience, but I guess I would say some takeaways were, one, we found that it wasn't that most of the people who came through our program did all right or avoided going back to prison, despite all the effort and all the help that we provided them. It was that the people that didn't get the help did so poorly, right? Like the standard experience of people coming out of prison was so challenging and so overwhelming, and the number of barriers that they had in place long even before they entered prison, right, were far more than any of us would be able to overcome. And so sort of that's the expected life course in many cases. I mean, out of the first 15 people that we worked with, 5 are now dead. The ambition of trying to provide that level of opportunity for people is extremely hard. It is possible, and we were working certainly with people that they had served a significant amount of time in medium security. They weren't people coming in, with their first offenses. Obviously, there's a wide disparity of experience for people that are coming in and out of prison. So we don't want to lump them all together for sure. The other takeaway that we found is that we could make a difference, right? We reduced felony recidivism rates by estimated around 25%. We proved to a high degree of statistical significance that we could increase parole rates by an estimated 45%. So we saw a lot of opportunity for what is possible when you make that investment, but we also saw how hard it is.
Thank you.
So I want to just step back just a little bit, ask and do this, and ask, well, what's the situation with prisons in the United States in a nutshell? I mean, in a super nutshell. So the situation in the United States is really unique. It's extraordinary, right? I think we all know that. There's more people incarcerated in this country than anywhere in the world. 1/4 of the people who are incarcerated in the world are incarcerated in this country, and they are incarcerated. I think we can agree there are exceptions to be sure, but they are incarcerated in horrible, horrible circumstances. Just in my home state in New York, understaffing, overcrowding, casual cruelty. Even last year in my home state, outright murder occurring in those prisons. So you have to ask yourself, why? Why is that? I'm looking out at a group of Americans. I mean, you guys are from a special state, Rhode Island, but you're Americans. I'm an American. I've been an American all my life. I think I'm qualified to say something about Americans. And something I will say about Americans is that we are fundamentally, I believe this in my core, decent people. We are fundamentally humane people. So how can you account for this? How can you account for this? How is this possible? Well, there are lots of reasons, but I think one reason is that these are closed, these are institutions that are hidden away from us. And that whenever you do that, they're hidden away from us in so many different ways. Now, to many, many people, they're not hidden. To the people who come from, they know that they're prisons. But I'm talking about for the people who run this country, for the power in this country, they're hidden. For elites, like you guys are, a lot of law students here, right? You guys are an elite part of the American society. And what about the curriculum in law schools that I've participated in for many years? The curriculum in law schools focuses on conviction or acquittal. There's no concern for what happens afterwards. Well, that reflects what goes on in society. We have closed institutions. So why is it that the question was, what about resources? There are limited resources, and there are horrible circumstances that people have talked to. People can't get books. People come out and really, really traumatized, I think. I think people have a traumatic experience going to prison. And so there is this disconnect the whole time I've been in this. I mean, there's this disconnect between how can we have this country that is basically made up of fundamentally decent people and a fundamentally indecent prison system. And here's my thinking, and my thinking is one thing we got to do is we got to end this disconnection, right? You guys have studied brand. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe if we can open up these prisons much more than they are today, and that's one of the things I want to talk about with this one proposal, which I hope does a little bit toward that. If we can open up prisons a little bit more, we will bring the values of our society into those places. And when that happens, I believe prisons will not become good places. They can never really be good places, but they will become decent places that no longer traumatize gratuitously the people that are there. And when that happens, there will be resources. There won't be the need for what you do, the wonderful work you do. And the wonderful work you do will be not as difficult, will be difficult, but not as difficult. And I think that's the task we all have to set for ourselves. And unless we do that, we're going to have this, what do I say, this stain, this curse on our society that is injuring the people in it, and it's injuring all of us. It's affecting our society in a negative way. And we're spending billions of dollars to hurt ourselves.
So if I may, I'm just going to add a prisoner's voice. So we get requests for, the Stephen King, the thrillers, the fantasy, the science fiction, but we also do get requests for self-help books and how-to books. Because the reality is that there isn't a lot of rehab happening in prisons. And so I'm just going to read a section of a letter from a prisoner. This is Texas. Hello, I am a G5 inmate. G5 is high security. I am locked in my cell 24 hours, constantly with nothing more to do but play with ants. I love to read. I'm so used to reading daily, but now I do not have that privilege to go to the library. I also don't have family who can send me books. I've learned about books through bars. Will you send me free books? That is such a blessing. I'm very thankful for all of you. I'm into manga, but I understand that mangas are not as common as fiction or fantasy, which are my favorites. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you all for your answers. Turning to Dr. Zink, providing resources directly to incarcerated people through Providence Book Through Bars, what patterns do you notice in the book requests you receive? And what does that say about the unmet educational or emotional needs of prisoners?
So I spoke to that a little bit a minute ago in that, we get very common requests for the popular fiction, and those are often donated. So all of our books are donated. We have to be careful about the condition the books are in. Hardbacks are usually not permitted and they are expensive to mail. So our packages are usually 3 to 4 pounds, which is just under to just over $6 a package. Uh, we, which is about 3 to 5 books. Uh, because of kind of the limitations of the cost of postage and also the number of volunteers that we have, we send about 2,000 packages a year. And so prisoners also want journals. Some prisons will allow journals, some will not. People ask for game books. A lot of people ask for dictionaries and thesaurus. We purchase those because those are rarely donated. We also have some artists, and I brought a show and tell here because sometimes they do send us their artwork. So I'll ask you to help me here.
Sure.
So this is a Michael from North Carolina Federal Prison who wrote us a thank you note and shared some of his artwork. So these are recycled paper taped together. So clearly he's into cars and he's asking for some car magazines. Some prisoners will allow car magazines and some will not. And this one is taped together with stickers, kind of labels. Um, so people who don't have families, are not getting resources. Um, I guess when I look at these and we receive these, we share these with our other volunteers, and what touches me is the the creativity and the possibility that is behind bars, that is not being tapped. And without the availability for rehab, or we get letters sometimes that say, I'm coming out in a year, can you send me some, materials to help me? Where do I start? That does not come as a donated, book. And how can I begin to address, some of the issues that you've talked about? So, and so, some people just want comics, but many people are seriously trying to better themselves. There's one letter we get that he has read 1,000 books and he's reading all the classics. So, he's gotten Odysseus and Greek and Roman, and we have started sending that list back and forth so we didn't have to rewrite it every time. And so there are a variety of patterns, but I would say that, many people want to read because they want to make changes to their life.
So I just wanted to amplify some of the things we've already heard. I think Nick made a point to say that the people who are in not a monolith, and I thought that was important to point out, that I don't think we're going to be able to represent everybody's voice, but I think it's important to think, who are these people as individuals? I also think Professor Michelin made the point that the way things are currently is not inevitable. That these, like the current state of affairs is through a series of choices, and the choices could be made differently. And I think there's also this sort of theme of disconnect. So, Professor Michelin, I want to follow up on that. you started to tell us a little bit about your work and kind of bridging the disconnect between judges who sentence and incarcerated people who are sentenced.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the program and any impacts you have seen? And what is your hope for the future of the program?
Well, thank you for that question. And it's Michael. Uh, so let me tell you about this proposal. There is New York now is considering a proposal that will require every judge in the state of New York who either sentences people to prison or who orders someone detained pending trial to, on an annual basis, make a meaningful visit to a New York prison and jail. Thank you. This has been 3 years of an effort. I chair a subcommittee on the Office of Court Administration. The subcommittee is made up of 9 people. 5 of them are judges. One is a criminal defense lawyer. One is a leading expert in prison oversight at the University of Texas. And the final person is the former commissioner of the New York State prison system. We made this proposal a year ago to the chief judge of the state of New York, and to my delight, and I have to say, can I tell you confidentially, my surprise, on September 29th, our proposal was released for public comment. The public comment period ends in 2 weeks. I have on the side there the release from the state of New York and a little essay, not a little memo that I wrote about the proposal. There's also an op-ed that was published in the New York Law Journal. It's the best op-ed I've ever written because I got to write it with 5 judges, a former commissioner of correction, and leading a fellow professor. We were all unanimous, and the op-ed is entitled "What Justice Kennedy Saw and What Judges Should See." Justice Kennedy, Anthony Kennedy, now retired from this. Tell me when I'm going too long, because I don't want to. I could just go forever. So
Wait, a professor?
Justice Kennedy said this. I want to quote 2 people who are authorities: Justice Kennedy and Chekhov. Justice Kennedy said that the problem with the American justice system is that it focuses on what I said earlier. It focuses on guilt or innocence, and it forgets what happens afterwards. What Justice Kennedy said is prisons are out of sight, out of mind. What Chekhov said, having been in prison in Russia over 100 years ago, he made a comment that's relevant to the United States. He said the excessive focus is on the criminal defendant until the point of conviction, and the criminal defendant is forgotten. This proposal is designed to address that in the ways that I said when I spoke at first, to at least do something to start opening these places up. My central thesis is that unless we open up prisons, we don't have a chance. Let me put it another way. If we don't do something to open prisons up, forget about it. Because that's what we do. We forget about it. So this proposal begins to address that. Do you know how many states in the United States? I am a law professor, and I have research assistants, smart law students, who do help me with my research. And we did a very careful search of all the laws and regulations in the United States. Do you know how many states in the United States require every judge who sentences someone to see the places that he or she sends someone to? Zero. So if this proposal is approved, New York will be the first, and my hope is that it'll be a model to the country. Now, whether or not this is going to get approved, I've been in this field long enough to be cautious and to be frightened. And so I think we really need to generate public support for it. The period for public comments ends 2 weeks from today. Anybody in the United States can send a public comment. You just send an email to rule comments at newyorkstatecourts.gov. Rule comments at newyorkstatecourts.gov.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So shout out to Professor Bornberg and Professor Heery, because we have for a while been having conversations about how this might work for law students. But one of the conversations is, how do you do it in a way that it's not like taking students to a zoo,
Yes.
so that it's not performative?
Yes.
It's not.
Yes.
It's not traumatizing to the people who are living in these places.
Yes.
And how do you do it so it's not like, oh, look there? How are you planning on doing that?
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time on that. There are 3 ways to do visits. One way to do visit is to have a serious inspection of a prison, to really do a detail, with experts coming in and measuring the prison against benchmarks, the way you accredit hospitals, the way you accredit law schools. You take that approach into prisons. Another way to visit prisons is to have a dog and pony show. So the problem with judges is when judges visit, and I've been on visits like this, when judges visit, let me tell you, when judges do visit, let me tell you what a common visit is. A common visit, I've been on these, is you go to the superintendent's office. They're called superintendents in New York. You go in, it's a nice office and it's a conference room, and you get wonderful pastries and coffee and soft drinks, and they bring in the staff, the leadership staff, and you spend 2 hours hearing about all the programs that they have and also all the problems they have, etc. And then you go out of the superintendent's office after about 2 hours, and you go to a model program, and then you go home. So you don't see the place. So what we tried to do is craft how do you do a meaningful visit to a prison? Not an inspection prison, not a dog and pony show. And I could go into what that is. But now what you're getting at is this performative? Is this like a visit to a zoo? Is it demeaning to the people that are there? When you do a meaningful visit, and I would like to talk to you about what a meaningful visit is, and I've been on many of them, and I've been on 4 testing this proposal. My sense of it is that prisoners welcome it. I think that's an understatement. It's an understatement because people who have not been seen are being seen by people in authority, and particularly when judges go to prisons. I've been on hundreds of prisons visits. I've been on 4 with judges. Those 4 are qualitatively different. When a judge goes into a prison, a judge who sentences people goes into a prison and meets and sees where the people are living and what they're doing, and goes into all the places, even the darkest places in those prisons, the solitary confinement units, etc., and then also sits down and talks to them. See, I think an essential part of a meaningful visit is a conversation, an adult-to-adult conversation between people who sentence people to prison and the people who have been sentenced. And those conversations, and I've been on them, they have really surprised me in how profound they are and how important they are. I've seen it on the faces of the judges who've had those conversations, and they've told me what a difference it has been to go on those visits, which we have, what I describe as a realistic, meaningful visit, versus the dog and pony show, which is the common one.
Well, thank you, Professor. Turning to Director Horton, and in stabilizing people post-incarceration, how much do criminal records, court debt, and supervision fees keep people from stabilizing in Rhode Island? And as a follow-up to that, do you think there are any specific reforms that would be helpful in this area?
Sure. I want to start by answering this question by talking about if you all want to do something about these problems, what is that experience like? Because these challenges are tremendous, and I think coming out of college, or coming out of law school, we all want to make a difference, and I think it's really essential to understand how long this change happens. So I'm going to start by talking about a campaign that Open Doors started working on in 2005, which was to end the widespread existence of debtor's prison in Rhode Island. When I started Open Doors, our clients were coming in talking about how they were spending all this time in jail just for owing small amounts of money. So we started doing research. I went into the prisons. I interviewed about 30 people. It was horrendous what we found. I mean, not as bad as what was going on in some southern states at the time. But, I talked to one man who was there for around 40 days for owing, around $700. And basically just they forgot about him while he waited to go to his court hearing on his ability to pay court hearing. So we spent about 4 years passing legislation. 2 pieces of legislation passed. It was a collaboration really at that time between us and the public defender's office, Mike DeLauro, and I worked on drafting the legislation. One piece was about making it so that people's fines and fees were reduced by $150 a day for each day they spent in prison, which is extremely effective because immediately the judges wanted to get people out. And then the other law required ability to pay hearings and sort of set standards for the process for waiving fees for people that were indigent, that were supposed to be pretty clear cut. After that law passed, we saw some changes, but then ultimately it was ignored for about 10 years, literally ignored by the judiciary, in that it required courts to use a specific form to hold these hearings, to tell people about their rights to have these hearings, and they just weren't doing it. Then there was an attempt to pass a law to force the judiciary to start implementing these changes. I think in 2019, the judiciary showed up, their lobbyists showed up and opposed the legislation and indicated that they were already doing what they had to do, which was blatantly false. And then several years later, with efforts that were led by the Center for Health and Justice Transformation, they started working with the judiciary and the Commission on Race and Fairness that headed by Judge Long, who embraced the changes, worked with the center, ended up working to waive tens of thousands of dollars of people's debts, and then drastically transforming the system so that most of the problems we were seeing back in 2006 don't happen anymore. The system is certainly not, those problems certainly aren't solved, but it is very different. So just to say that this is how long that reform took, right? And that's an easy one, right? We're sort of nibbling around the edges of the problem with that, right? When we started this work, people were going to prison just for owing a couple $100s. They were going to prison for just having small amounts of marijuana. We helped pass legislation to decriminalize and obviously ultimately legalize marijuana, so that a lot of that is not happening anymore. When we started this work, people couldn't vote when they were on probation and parole. We helped change the Rhode Island Constitution in 2006 so they can. So a lot has improved. But in terms of what is it like now and what could we do to make it work better, so I would identify a couple different starting points. So one is a project that we worked on with the Center for Justice for several years, which is that people are still coming out of prison or never going to prison, but being arrested for driving on a suspended license, losing their licenses for owing several hundreds of dollars in court costs. And this is the most common reason people are arrested in Providence, is driving without a license. And there's a lot of changes that could be made. We have suggested a number of reforms, including charging less or making a sort of an automated process for reducing fines and fees for people that are indigent, so that when people get parking tickets who are indigent, they owe less, and thus they are less likely to lose their licenses. A second would be what's sort of fundamental to a lot of the ways that the criminal justice system in Rhode Island works is extremely long probation sentences, one of the longest in the country. And that's sort of at the root of a lot of problems that we see. And so there was successful legislation passed, I think in 2018, to create a process by which people's probations can be terminated early after 3 years if they meet a number of conditions. So we have a process for that to happen. It's just not implemented as much as it could. So there's, I think, a lot of opportunity there to reduce these pretty harmful or pretty problematic long-term prison sentences, probation sentences. Now, then related to that is the problem of expungement and the fact that these charges follow people for the rest of their lives. And there's very compelling research to show that just having a criminal record makes it extremely less likely that you'll get a job interview, for example. Even if everything else is the same, right? There was a randomized control trial to prove that. Representative Cruz, who's here today, had legislation passed on the House side to expand opportunities for expungement last year. And Open Doors is launching a campaign with Direct Action for Rights and Equality. Melanie here from DARE this year, called the Clean Slate Initiative, where we're going to be trying to expand opportunities for expungement. And the problem with our system right now is that first you have to finish your probation, then you have to wait 5, 10, 15 years to have the opportunity to get your charges expunged. And one of the things we'd like to see in Rhode Island is what has been passed in some other states, including New York and California, is an automated process where a certain set of charges are automatically removed from someone's record, because we should be able to agree that after a certain amount of time, right, something doesn't have to be on someone's record, and they shouldn't have to go through an arduous process and go in front of a judge to have it removed. It should just be sort of an automated pro forma process. So those are some stories and next steps.
Well, thank you, Director Horton. Those sound like wonderful reforms, and hopefully some of them can be implemented. Turning to this question's open to anyone, and I think in the media and popular culture writ large, there are misconceptions about what resources prisoners are entitled to. What do you all think about? What's the biggest misconception about that the public has about what resources incarcerated persons are entitled to, and how do we correct that misconception?
So I can jump in. I think people may assume that people have fine, nutritious food, get all of their medical needs taken care of, can make phone calls, and have free classes. And the reality is that none of that is true. That if families are unable to support that, some medical needs are not honored, and that any phone call is often monitored, so there is no opportunity for privacy. And as we know, from our book issues, is that access to books is limited. And so I'll just kind of so about half of the prisons in the U.S. receive books from Amazon only. Rhode Island is one of those, and so any book we send to that is rejected. So there's clearly some deal with Amazon that people get new books and that they are packaged in a way that the prisons feel things are safe. And that was a shock to me. And in the 6 years I've been doing this, there's more and more prisons that we strike off our list because of that Amazon only rule. So I'll stop there and compatriots respond.
Thank you, Doctor.
The question is why? Can you repeat the question?
The question is about what misconception, the biggest misconception that the public has about what resources incarcerated persons are entitled to, and how do we correct that misconception?
Well, there are lots of ways we can correct that. Well, there is a misconception. I come back to my premise, which is my central premise, is that prisons are closed, and that if we open them up, they're not gonna be as terrible as they were. And so the question is, how do you open them up? Well, how do you open them up? How do you open them up? Lots of ways that we could do that. One little way is this proposal that I'd love to talk more about: judicial visits to prisons, and that should, if that was just think about that. If that was done nationally, everywhere in the United States, judges who were sentencing people were required to go and look at where they were. What a difference that might make. Yes, what is it?
I'm sorry, if you're going to ask a question, can you just do it into a microphone for those people who might not be able to hear you?
I've got other reasons for what we talk about. Yeah.
How does New York plan to address
What?
the power dynamic between a prisoner and a judge visiting and making sure that you're getting honest, realistic feedback about what's actually happening when
Yeah.
you aren't looking behind closed doors?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What we did for a meaningful visit is real simple to describe. One is that you don't do the dog and pony show. The other thing that you go to every area, every central area of the prison. So what do? You go and you look at the housing blocks. You have to go to the solitary confinement unit, to the disciplinary unit. You have to go and go to the food service unit. And you know what you do when you go to a food service unit, you not only see how the food is prepared, you look at what the meal is. I had wanted it to be actually eat the meal. I part with it. You go to the recreation areas. You go to the medical area. You go to the visiting area. You go to the educational area. You see all the areas. Sit down and you actually have a conversation with the person. Now, those conversations are going to be monitored. There's no doubt about it. And I don't. In my experience, those conversations have been quite candid. Now, how do I account for that? I don't know. They've been with the leader. In New York, there's inmate liaison committees, and those people are the elected leaders of the prison population. But you identify, there's some things there is, when the judges leave, there's the possibility of retaliation, correct? Yeah, I mean, that's there. That's there. This is not a magic bullet, and this is not a magic bullet. And there's definitely is that danger that could occur. And the fact that that's a possibility might mean that people won't really be candid about what they're saying. My experience has been, and actually, my experience as a prisoner's rights lawyer is that prisoners are. I have seen a lot of courage. I've seen a lot of courage in the incarcerated population. I've seen people in the work that I did take risks that I don't know that I would have taken. And I've represented people that because of what they've done, they've been punished. I've represented people who have ended up in the hole. I've represented people that ended up being transferred. In New York, you can be banished. In New York, you can be sent to a prison. In New York, you can live in New York and be sent to a prison on the Canadian border, far, far away. So you're right, those dangers are there. The question then is it worth it to do it nevertheless, even with those limitations? My answer is resoundingly yes, it's worth doing it. But, not to sell it as this is going to change. Can I talk really quickly? Law school curriculum should be changed.
Of course, Professor.
It should be. The law school, the way we teach, and I've been involved in it, the way we teach law students is wrong. We teach law students that the lawyer's concern ends at the final judgment. That's wrong. There's a world post-final judgment. I taught civil procedure. This is true in civil law as well as criminal law. That legal education reflects this focus that's wrong. And I want to have a thought experiment. Do you have a course you have a clinic, and I'd love to learn more about it, and I applaud you for doing that. I think every law school should have a course in prisoners' rights. I mean, it should be a no-brainer. I think if you're going to teach criminal law, how can you not teach prisoners' rights? How can you not teach prison law? I think that would open up prisons more. I think if every state had independent governmental oversight of prisons, that would make a difference. I'll stop.
All right, Nick, I think
Sure.
it's your turn.
Yeah. So you answered two different answers. I'd say the biggest problematic assumption people have about people coming out of prison is that they are bad people, that they will always be bad people, and I worked with people for decades, have very close friendships and acquaintances with people who have, in their past, committed some of the most horrible crimes you could imagine.
Right.
And they are people that I would trust with the most valuable things that I have. The possibility for complete redemption exists. I'm not saying that this in some sort of naive way. Uh, we work with people who are also going through a lot of very difficult challenges when they're coming out, and I'm not saying everyone is fully trustworthy or going to go about their lives wonderfully after they come out. You always have to be aware that people who have never been in prison or people that have been in prison, can have challenges. But that complete redemption is possible. My other answer is sort of on the flip side. I think for this room, one assumption about resources that is false or not helpful, that I'd say a lot of sort of prison reform advocates or liberals feel is that, or talk about, is this idea, well, it costs $100,000 to incarcerate someone, so that's more money than it costs to send someone to an elite university. Why don't we just spend it on the elite university? And that is unfortunately an incomplete way to do the math. The cost of incarcerating someone for one person for one day in prison right now in the ACI, I think it's probably around $16 a day, and that's just because the per person costs, are small, just like sending one person student to a school, right? It's just the extra costs of some food or some healthcare, and it's really the sunk costs, the facility costs, and mostly the staffing costs that lead to those very high numbers. So we spend about $17 million to fund the women's prison, and they have about 120 beds. So it's extremely expensive for to incarcerate one woman for 1 year in Rhode Island by that math. But just adding one woman, right? It's pretty cheap. So when you start to think about how do we decarcerate, you actually have to confront that very difficult math. So our goal is this idea of justice reinvestment, that we can reinvest the money that we're spending in prisons into services. But first, you have to prove that you can actually keep people from going back. And then you have to do it at a scale that would allow you to close a module or close a facility. And that is something that, frankly, no one yet has figured out how to do.
Thank you for that.
My question is for anyone who wants to answer it. In your experience in Rhode Island and beyond, across facilities and jurisdictions, what are the most significant barriers to ensuring equitable access to resources for those who are currently incarcerated?
So do you mean just while they're in prison, equitable access while they're in prison, or more broadly out?
You can answer with that however you want.
Okay. I mean, I'm just going to talk about addiction because for me, that's sort of our big focus right now. What we've seen in Rhode Island is a lot of improvements. Actually, Rhode Island has been on the forefront of expanding access to methadone and Suboxone for people while they're incarcerated for medication-assisted treatment. But still, generally what happens is someone who is cycling in and out of prison for addiction issues goes in, doesn't get the treatment that they need, and then comes out and has the exact same problem. So they shouldn't be going to prison. They should be going to some sort of secure treatment facility because generally while they're there, they're not really getting much help. So yeah, I guess to me that's the largest problem. We are seeing some, hopeful changes inside the prison right now. And right now, like the opportunities inside of correctional facilities are quite high for reform due to increasing access to technology. So people inside the ACI now can get iPads, and I talked to a woman recently who said, she had, while she was inside for about a month, she spent time going through the coursework, the classes about recovery and addiction, and she was telling me what she had learned, right? And that's not something that had ever happened before, because you can get that on tablet, you can just learn so much. And then if you think of like what happens once people get access to individualized AI-driven learning opportunities inside the prison on those tablets, like that could be tremendous. And that tech already exists. It's just a matter of actually getting people access to it.
Thank you.
So I'll just dovetail on that. So the notebooks, the iPads are great, but in some prisons, you need to have money to buy books, to have access to certain resources. So one thing to think about is, can there be some agreement between that prison and the local library so that they can download resources like I can, ebooks from Rhode Island. So the pads are great, but sometimes you have to have money. And not having money, and then the other issue that we see are language barriers. So we get some requests written in Spanish, asking for Spanish books. And I am not sure how many Spanish-speaking guards or people there are in the prison settings to work with a variety of different languages that may be there.
Yeah, I think what you were saying is what both of you said was so important is that seeing the humanity of the people in prison, not just seeing one aspect, however. I just want to read a couple of sentences from a formerly incarcerated person who wrote in support of the prison visiting, the judicial visits to prison. He said, "I've lived the reality that judges rarely see." This is Alex Duran. "I live the reality that judges rarely see. I spent 12 years in New York State's prison system, and I have personally experienced how the distance between the courtroom decisions and the conditions inside correctional institutions allows enormous harm to remain invisible. Amid that distance, people are too often reduced to their worst moments. Judges encounter them only when they are charged, convicted, vulnerable, not when they are learning, growing, and contributing. But I have seen what is possible when the world gets a fuller picture." So, if every law student in the United States came out of law school with some appreciation of prisons, if judges had some appreciation, if the barriers to the courthouse that currently exist that Congress has erected between the prisons of the United States and obtaining relief for constitutional violations. The Prison Litigation Reform Act, are people familiar with that act? Well, everybody should know about that act because that act creates barriers for the assertion of constitutional rights to prisoners, unlike any barriers any other citizen in the United States. That has to end. And when we have independent oversight of prisons, I think those really are critical first steps to addressing what is I don't know, it's more than a scandal. It's a disgrace to the American people, I think. And I think when that happens, what Dostoevsky says is you want to measure a society, go to its prisons. When we have decent prisons, measure society. When we have decent prisons, we're going to have a decent society. So the first step to a decent society, or a necessary step to a decent society, is changing prisons.
We have a question. Yeah, just want to make sure you go to a mic.
There's also a gentleman in the back with a question if you wanted to step up.
I don't know if you've mentioned this, but can you talk a little bit about the people that are in the companies that are profiting off of the treatment that people who are incarcerated are getting, and how that is likely a barrier to making some of these reforms, what we often call the prison industrial complex?
Uh, sure. So private prisons are obviously a big problem, but they're not most prisons. In Rhode Island, the state system is public. So talking about largest prison here, uh, the Correctional Officers Union is the strongest union in the state. It's one of the strongest correctional officers unions in the country. Costs of incarceration in Rhode Island are actually quite high, and it's because of the strength of that union. And so that union has a very strong invested interest in the status quo, in keeping prisons, keeping people in prison here. And I don't mean that they do it in some sort of manipulative way, that they're going around and trying to pass laws that force people to go to prison for crimes they didn't commit or something like that. But I think it's clear in what we in the work they do up at the State House that they are opposed to efforts to decarcerate, and so you obviously have to factor in the fact that they have that invested stake in it. That if somehow we were all able to do the idealistic work that we want to accomplish and reduce the number of people in prison substantially, which actually has happened. Rhode Island in 2008 passed excellent good time reform, which was a very simple reform, and it resulted in pretty substantial decrease in the sort of trajectory of incarceration here. That at every turn they're going to be opposed to those sorts of reforms for whatever reason they can find.
I just wanted to
Can I
also
add?
point out there's a database called the Prison Industry Corporate Database from the Worth Rises website, which is a database of corporations that do business with corrections and immigration detention in the US. And I think you would be surprised at the sheer number, but also the sort of ones that we all do business with also. Sorry, go ahead, Professor.
Yeah, I just want to add that I think one of the problems I think with the prison reform movement is that we haven't been able to figure out a way to have a really good dialogue with people who work in correction, because there there really is common ground that I think needs to be found. There was an article in the New Yorker that one of the best articles I've ever read about prisons, just a couple of weeks ago, that talked about it from the point of view of the prison guards and also from the point of view of prisoners in New York. And prison guards, the correction officers, the amount of addiction, of depression, of even suicide among that population is very high. They're in traumatic circumstances there. For some reason, there has been this schism that you put your finger on. That's certainly in New York and all over the country, where that people are behind those bars. When you go there as a correction officer, you're behind the bars there for a substantial part of your day. Your professional life is behind the bars, and you are really being traumatized as well in current conditions. And if somehow somebody could figure out how to have a conversation with those people, now some of those people, I want to say they're Americans. They're mostly fundamentally decent people. And if somebody can figure out a way to have a dialogue with them about what's going on and how bad it is for everybody, that would be terrific. But we haven't found a way to do that. But so sometimes, I mean, there are people that are profiting, but there are people that have sort of been misled, I think, in some ways, to think that the status quo benefits them somehow financially, where in reality they're really being harmed by it.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of people now, and I feel for them.
Yeah.
All right, we have another question.
I guess it's not so much of a question, but I don't know what it is. Anyway, so I want to point out that we do actually have two clinics here at the law school. One is for the women's facility, and I think that the women's facilities often get forgotten.
Yes.
We actually did do a walkthrough. Susan set it up. And what you just said about the corrections officers is totally true. We went into the area, which is seg, in the state of mind that you get in. I mean, they're working there for 8 hours, and they said it's an 8-hour shift. We sit here, and we were so anxious after 5 minutes of being, because it's just a very small area. So, whatever the men's prisons have gotten, the women have gotten way less. Their library's the size of a closet. They, on the tour, we saw, I mean, they have a workout area, but it's like a treadmill and a bike that looks like it's, about to fall over. It's not much. They don't have like many books or anything. And I just think it's important that when we're talking about prison reform, that we, like Abigail Adams said, remember the ladies, because whatever gets pushed, we know it's going mostly to the ladies on the ACI now would love to go over to. It's beautiful compared to where they are. So I think that just needs to be remembered.
Thank you for that statement, because you led us to the topic that I'd like to take a moment to focus on, and frankly, actually, all my answers so far have been leading up to to this idea, which is that I think we have the responsibility in this state and the opportunity to make a huge impact on the experience of women cycling through the criminal justice system. When the pandemic started happening, we saw in Rhode Island that the number of women incarcerated drastically decreased from around 110 any day to around 70. And it wasn't because fewer crimes were being committed or all of a sudden we had solved poverty or addiction. It was simply because we looked at the data. Judges were sending women to prison less for nonviolent felonies, probation violations. So there are major changes we can make just at the court level to start undoing some of the harms that are happening to women every day. And when we saw that happen, there actually was a sort of strange event that also happened at the same time, where the Department of Corrections proposed in their budget proposal that they would close the women's prison to save money, which they never intended to do, but it was just, that's sort of how the game gets played sometimes. But we seized on that and we said, okay, let's actually have this conversation. Let's talk about, if you want to propose to close the women's prison, what it would take to close the women's prison. And so we worked with the legislature and we formed a commission that met for 2 years to talk about the decarceration of women. And Dina was on that commission. That commission didn't accomplish anything, but it did sort of set the stage for, like, can we have this conversation? And at the same time, Open Doors has been prioritizing our focus on this issue. I guess I shouldn't say it didn't accomplish anything. I learned in that commission that the majority of women in prison are victims of domestic or sexual assault, right? So we don't have a prison, right? We have an institution that's punishing victims every day over and over again. So to try to start figuring out how to help with this crisis, Open Doors opened first a house for women coming out of prison, just a transitional house dedicated to women, the first of its kind in the state in 2022, and then a year later we opened up a house for women and children. And we have recently been really trying to work on how women can be diverted out of the system into a program like that, right? We have these excellent programs now that are run by women who themselves have succeeded, who've overcome these barriers, and have figured out how to help others. And we want to help people go into those programs instead of prison. So a couple weeks ago, right, we went into a court and worked with a woman who was sitting in awaiting trial. She'd been there for 2 months on a felony domestic assault charge, which was going to get dismissed anyway, on a bail of $10,000 that she wasn't paying, partially because she couldn't afford it, partially because she didn't have any place to go when she got out. So she was going to be homeless, so she wasn't trying to figure out how to pay the bill anyway. And we got her out of prison and into our program, right? So this is a success for everyone. It's a success for the state, for the court system, for the correctional officers. We save money, right, when these types of changes are made. But the problem is that we don't have a robust system. So the courts and the whole system isn't designed to work like that. We've been developing that system, and we want to expand it. And our goal is in the next 10 years to close the women's prison. And I think we can do it because we've been spending the last several decades getting here. And we also have started to develop a new tool, which I think is critical. I'm just going to talk about it for a quick moment, which is that one of the biggest challenges we have is addiction. And we, as a society, don't really have a solution to addiction. We have a lot of programs that sometimes work, and methadone and Suboxone are successful for the people that stay on them. But overall, we fail and we fail and we fail. There is some new hope that there's a medical treatment that is effective for addiction. And Open Doors is the first social service program in the country to allow access to this treatment. It's GLP-1 medication that some people in our programs have started taking. That's the class of medication known as Ozempic, commonly. There's compelling research that it can decrease cravings and use of alcohol, of opiates, of cocaine from between 30 to 70% in different studies. And so we're hopeful that if we can combine all of this, we can actually achieve this goal of proving that we can transform people's experiences, give them the opportunities to stay out of prison for good, and end that cycle. So that's what we're going to try to do, and we'd love your help.
Thank you, Director Horton. Our final question is for Professor Muslim. We were having a conversation in back about transgender rights in prisons. The Eighth Amendment standard for cruel and unusual punishment is deliberate indifference to serious medical needs. Some critics argue that extending the standard to gender-affirming care goes beyond the amendment's scope. And this was articulated in the case of Gibson v. Collier in the Fifth Circuit. How do you respond to the claim that such procedures fall outside of what deliberate indifference is meant to cover?
Well, before I answer, I just want to respond to your good question about, you're right, women in prison can very often be overlooked. And one of the things we did in our work over the 3 years is we met with a commission, it's the Betty Ellerin Committee on Women in the Courts, and they worked very closely with us. And as a result of that, we put into the regulation, with the handout is there, provisions that judges are that the visits be scheduled so that women's prisons are not overlooked, and that unique programs, that the unique needs of women be addressed in those visits. For example, in New York, what do you do? How do you treat women who come into prison pregnant and then are sentenced? So that question was a very good one. In terms of the transgender issue, there is a split in the circuits. You referring to the Fifth Circuit decision? There's a decision contrary to that in the Ninth Circuit. And I don't think it's going to surprise anybody that I find the Ninth Circuit more persuasive. And basically, what the Ninth Circuit said is that here's what the law, in a nutshell, here's what the law is. If you have a serious medical need, I'm quoting now from Estelle v. Gamble. If you have a serious medical need, prison officials cannot be deliberately indifferent to that serious medical need. So if you're bleeding and they see you bleeding and they say, that's your concern, not ours, that is cruel and unusual punishment, because you are sentenced to prison not to suffer unnecessarily and not to be tortured, and not to have what the court says, the gratuitous infliction of pain on you, because you're under the custody of the state, and if you're going to get anything, it's only going to come from the state. The Ninth Circuit said that there is a medical diagnosis, and I'm not a physician, you are, I'm sitting next to one, called gender dysphoria. And that if a person presents with that with that painful condition, that to ignore that condition is deliberate indifference. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but I find that reasoning to be persuasive, and the court relied upon expert testimony from that the prisoner had, the incarcerated person had that condition, and that in the state of Idaho it was being ignored, treatment was not being provided, and that was an Eighth Amendment violation. Now, I just want to say, just coming back to the theme of barriers, how do you get to court on a claim like that? It's very, very difficult even to get into the court because of the Prison Litigation Reform Act, which says that, if I have a claim, if I have a claim against anybody, against the state for anything, I don't have to exhaust any remedies. I can go to court immediately. But if I'm incarcerated, I can't. I've got to go to a grievance procedure, whether or not that grievance procedure is adequate, whether or not that grievance procedure can be easily navigated. To get into court, I have to go through that barrier. If I'm poor, I still have to pay the fee. If I'm a poor person, if I'm a poor person and a civilian, and I have a constitutional claim, I have the right as an American citizen to go to court and to petition for the redress of my grievances. Not so if you're a prisoner. So those kinds of barriers need to come down.